The Gourmet Gladiator. Chapter 4 Toby the Fighter. It was the end of the school day and the students must have truly forgiven me cause no teacher gave me a repercussion for what I did in the gymnasium. But that wasn't the end of it as I stepped out of the school's front doors and Bob and George were standing side by side waiting for me. I look at the both of them and George didn't seem any more different than he did before. A dangerous aura emanated from the both of them alike as I stood before them. As the students in the school begin to chatter and walk by, Bob walks up to me and menacingly says, "So you think that you can kick my ass, you punk? Well, guess what? I'm kicking your ass right now." He threw a punch and it was as if it was in slow motion. I stepped to the side and evaded the punch. When I thought that I dodged it, a fist came up the front of my shirt, striking me in my jaw. I fell on my butt as I stared up at Bob. George walks up beside me and calmly states, "This kid got you all up in arms because he worked out. What the hell are you yelling at me for, Bob?" Bob looked at George with only anger in his eyes. Bob shouts, "He kicked my ass this morning and you think I'm lying to you? If you just did what I told you, this SOB would be dead or powerless." George defensively says, "I did so to make him eat that table. And maybe it might have given him better looks and maybe increased strength, but you can't pin your ass beating on me." Bob walks up to me and I stand there pretending as if I didn't hear them insult me. He grabs my shirts and pulls me closer to him before he angrily says, "Try doing that to me one more time, then I will show you no more mercy." Deep down inside you is still that fat pig that would lick cake off of his face. A familiar sense of power rushed through my body and instantly I thought of pummeling Bob to a pulp. But I just put on an act as I put my hands up and nervously chuckled to myself. Bob launches his fist up into my gut and I was surprised to hear his hand pop as it made contact. Bob rails back his hand and screams in pain. His hand was red and was bleeding. He turned his back to me as he ran off crying. I lifted up my shirt and saw a tiny red mark on my six-pack. It was otherworldly seeing my body like this and not being fazed by Bob's attack. I lowered my shirt and looked at George, who was putting his hands in his pockets, and walked closer to me. I raise my hands in the air and nervously state, "Please stop where you are. I don't want any trouble." He spits on the ground next to me before staring at my face. He calmly asks, "What person are you, Toby? Because from what I see, I still see a weakling. I truly have pity for you." Something washed over me as suddenly my face went serious and I monotonously say, "You and Bob are no longer the strongest students here. Just back off and let me be." Before I could turn around and walk away, stars filled my mind and a blast of kinetic force was released on my nose. I was launched onto my back as my head bounced off the cement. My head was spinning all around the place, eyes were blurry, and as I tried to stand up to walk, I stumbled on my own two legs and collapsed back on the cement. Footsteps drew closer to me and panic began to eat its way into my brain. The world was spinning at speeds that began to make me feel ever so queasy. A hand pulls my hair and yanks me up onto my knees. My vision came together for a split second to make up George's face. He was not mad, sad, happy. He seemed as if his thoughts were somewhere else at the present time. A loud boom rang off inside of my head and almost instantly my body woke up along with my mind. As George's fist came striking downwards towards my face, I made my entire body teleport behind him. As he strikes nothing but air, he turns around and sees me, and this time his face is filled with curiosity. I shake off my confusion and calmly and surprisingly confidently say, "People like you who don't know the struggles of being on the bottom. Move aside as I move to the top while you stay here with Bob." George cracks his knuckles before he tilts his head and calmly states, "Top, bottom, middle. Does a hierarchy really matter in this world anymore? The way I see it, you're the crybaby here. You have rich parents and used to have a weight problem. But in this society that really wasn't a problem. Now Bob bullied you. But that was it. On top of that, you're nearly a valedictorian here. So let me go down your list of problems. Bullied by one person, was fat and now isn't, and maybe you weren't noticed and avoided because of problem 2. And that is what you call bottom." Nails erupt out of his skin, nearly covering his whole body. Now here I am, near the cream of the crop, and yet my life is in complete ruins. See, my family is down to me and my mom. I have to act tough instead of studying because of people like you. And if you only knew half the things that happen in my family, you would piss yourself and run. He raises his fist in the air as if he was in an actual boxing ring. I raised my hand and thousands of tiny portals formed a disc in front of me. I try to hold back tears of rage and pity as I shout. Yet you're still the bully. This caused George to leap forwards at me. He struck out with his nail-covered fist, and upon touching my disc of portals it was as if his fist was going through a paper shredder. Luckily for him, he jumped backwards before his entire hand was nothing but mincemeat on the floor. I formed a hole beneath me, and as I tranced through the portal I put another portal within that tunnel, and suddenly I was behind George. He turned around and struck out at me with his fist. I was able to duck under his fist and swing up with mine. He smiled as a handful of nails shot out of his chin. I drove my fist into the nails and was dumbfounded by the amount of pain that ran through my body. He moved his head, and ever so effortlessly he moved my body around. He brought his elbow down into the pivot of my shoulder. I could hear the snap as bones dislocate. He grabbed my hand and I bursted out crying, "Please don't remove my hand." The pain was intense, and now I was trying to focus on the one spot that it hurt the less. The sense of his power was now running through my system, but how would any of it help me now that I am pinned? George recedes the nails and allows me to collapse on the ground. I grabbed my hand and looked down at it. The holes in my hand exposed the bones and flesh. I screamed at the sight before standing up and trying to run inside the school. George's knee was sent into my stomach, winding me. I gasped for air as it escaped my lungs. George grabs my hair and lifts my head up to stare him in his angered face. He states, "Now listen here, punk. You go home and maybe solve this problem by yourself. Don't even think of ratting on me to the school nurse." He threw another punch and I heard a pop, and then sudden blackness made a veil over my eyes. Asterisk, asterisk. I wake up and my arm is in a cast. I wear my clothes with bandages underneath, and I lay on a hospital mattress with a blue curtain secluding me from the rest of the room. I looked at my left hand that was perfectly fine, and the entire fight between me and George came back to mind. My body involuntarily shivers in fright. I stared at my left hand, and through a push of thought nails emerged from the tip of my fingers. His power is still copied in my body. I have to get out of this bed and show him that I will become the next top chef. I take my right foot and place it on the ground. The cold marble floor sent my skin crawling back. Still I put my other foot on the floor and began to walk out of my little section of what I can only assume be the hospital room. I moved the curtain aside and Rebecca was right there in front of my face. She jumped back in surprise as she placed her fingers over her mouth before gasping. The nails receded and now I stood there as if a hammer struck me stupid at what I should be doing. My heart was pounding as much my hand was. With each thump or breath that was coming out of me was like breathing in nails and exhaling iron pipes. I couldn't find the proper words to come together and say hi. Instead I nervously asked, "So what are you doing here?" I place my casted hand behind my head nervously as I frame a smile. Rebecca removes her hand away from her mouth and adorns a smile. She cheerfully says, "At least you're not dead. Now come on and go sit back down on your medical bed." I brought us coffee. I didn't even notice that she was holding a paper cup holder with 2 cups of coffee. I take a deep breath as I walk back to my bed and sit down. Rebecca walks over and sits next to me. Now I could feel my cheeks glow red. I quickly took a cup of coffee from her breast. Tray. She quietly takes out her cup and throws the paper tray into the trash. She takes a sip of her coffee, with her soft red lips pressing up on the rim of the cup. She turns her head towards me and mutters something. I couldn't quite make it out as my thoughts began to race. Suddenly a snap of her fingers next to my ears got me to snap out of my fantasies. I look at her and she is looking at me with a raised eyebrow. I nervously state, "Sorry, must have been knocked in the head quite a few times." "Sorry." Her face then turns to look at the wall. Her aura emanated with frustration. She lets go of a sigh before she says, "You were thinking about starting another fight with George. Now aren't you?" A moment of relief and frustration washed over me almost immediately. I state, "Yeah. He messed up my hand and so now I must do something in retaliation." That is how the world works after all. I take a sip from my coffee, letting the bitter taste hit my tongue. Rebecca states, "It's just been a day since you got your powers and now you're like an entirely different person. Can you just look back at your life and just think?" She takes another sip of her coffee. "Now that she said that, I kinda ran the entire day through my head. I just figured that when everyone gained power they became more confident in a way. First I get in a fight right off the bus, then I battle it out and endanger the other students' lives during class, and now I am in the hospital because I got in another fight." I took another sip of my coffee and just shook my head in disbelief. "Sorry, Toby. I didn't mean to upset you. I just think that the nicer and more shy you was better than how you are now." I calmly stop shaking my head and close my eyes as I state, "You're right. But I don't like how I was before. I was a fat nothing. And now just beginning today people will begin to notice me. They didn't before and now they do. And with that said, I think that my reputation should be on the top." Rebecca stands up and begins to leave. "Wait, where are you going?" She stopped for a second before going out of my hospital room. I looked down at the cup of coffee and just behind my thumb there was something written on it. I removed my thumb and saw in writing, "For my best friend, Toby." My heart was throbbing and sudden realization sent my mind into the deepest, darkest section of my mind. Zensilariku. This is very interesting. It is more like an inner battle with himself. The fight he has with George is...
Hey, this is Grant Ayers. This was the 4th chapter of the Gourmet Gladiator, Toby the Fighter. You can go check it out on Inkit. My name is Grant Ayers. Have a good day.